Our scripture today is from the book of Luke, chapter 6, beginning at verse 37. It says, "Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you." He also told them a parable. "Can a blind man lead a blind man? Will they not both fall in the pit? A disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Brother, let me take out the speck that is in your eye,' when you yourself do not see the log that is in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take out the log in your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take out the speck that is in your brother's eye. For no good tree bears bad fruit, and nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. For figs are not gathered from a thorn bush, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. The good person, out of the good treasures of his heart, produces good fruit, and an evil person out of the evil treasures produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks." I know that's a lot of scripture today, but I'm going to zing through it here as fast as I can. I'm going to be using a visual aid later to help us understand what Jesus is trying to teach us in these two parables. And I believe they're closely tied together, these two parables. Jesus is talking to us. He's speaking to his disciples, and we consider ourselves to be disciples of Christ. Right? The Great Commission, go forth and make disciples. That's supposed to be what we are. He's talking about our attitudes towards others. Not just what we think about others, but how we see them, how we treat them, and even how we teach them, and certainly how we judge them. I'll start right off, verse 37. It says, "Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven." Now, true to form, this verse of Scripture is almost always taken out of context. Just about every time you hear this verse, it's taken out of context. It's one of the weapons that the enemy of the church chooses to use the most. People who are in complete defiance of the church or at war with the church love to use this verse to shut down the truth. And it's so taken out of context. Because the reality is we need to judge. The reality is we need to judge ourselves. The reality is the church needs to be examining itself at all times. I mean, judge not. I mean, let's take this to our children. Our children are 3 years old and they're climbing a ladder. We say, "Get down, it's not safe for you." "Don't judge me." Well, that's how it's used. Often when I say something to someone, it's because I fear for where they're heading. Because every action has a consequence. And because I want to do it, it's not going to be a defense when we stand before God. When we stand before God, God's not going to say, "I don't care what you wanted to do. You're allowed to do all things. This is what happened." And so I think we as a church need to be constantly looking at ourselves. And you know, I have an accountability group that I meet with, the men's group on. It's going to be moving to Wednesday, by the way, Mark. On Tuesday mornings, and that's one of the things that I demand of them, to look at me and let me know when I'm doing something wrong. And Mark and Paul and John are very faithful to do that. If they hear me say something or act a certain way, they're very faithful to say, "You know what, Pastor? You maybe need to revisit that." And that's okay. Because if we don't do that, we'll never grow. If every exam you ever gave in school, they just give you 100% and hand it back to you, how much do you think you'd learn? We need to be examining our walk. I know, me personally, I need to be examining my walk at all times. Next weekend, we're going to the pastor's retreat, and that's not laying on the beach. I'm going to my sister's wedding in November. That's laying on the beach. This pastor's retreat, which last year was just overwhelming. If you remember this pastor's retreat last year, they had a doctor speak. I think I told you about this, and he came and he said, I've been working 7 days a week for 30 years, and I feel great. This guy was the head of the biggest emergency department in Arizona. And he said 400,000 people will drop dead of sudden cardiac arrest in the United States this year, and of those 400,000 people, 300,000 of them will have no signs or symptoms. I've been working 7 days a week for years, and I feel great. How does that fit now? And so since that weekend, I have taken Thursdays off. Because I realized I wasn't being faithful with my Sabbath. I wasn't taking a Sabbath. And so, you know, these things are not easy, but they're self-examining. And I think that's good. We need to take a real look at the meaning given behind the second sentence, and specifically the word condemn, okay? Because it starts off, he says, judge not, and you will not be judged, condemn not, and you will not be condemned. And the word condemn, it truly means to send someone to their doom, or to say that they are unfit for service. It's not saying that, well, there might be a problem here. We need to make some slight adjustments, okay? That's what he's saying not to do. He's not saying don't look at yourself. He's not saying don't look at each other. He's not saying don't work with each other. Don't be honest with each other. He's saying don't condemn anyone. Don't judge them to hell. Don't say they're not worth it. The thief on the cross. There's a thief in heaven. And something we talked about last week, the last time I preached, it said, we will be forgiven with the same way, the same measure that we will forgive. So the same way that we're forgiving towards people will be the same thing that's used against us. Think about that one. In verse 38, it says, given and be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put in your lap. For with the measure you use it, will be measured back to you. We're going to come back to this a little later. But I want us to make sure that we understand what we give to others will come back to us in the same way it was given. So let's just let that sink in for a second while we think about how we treat people. And then in verse 39 it says, he also told them a parable. Can a blind man lead a blind man? Will they not both fall into a pit? You see, it starts off with he also. The word also indicates to me that this is all part of the same event. It's all part of the same moment. It's all part of the same day. He's just carrying on here. He begins with a rhetorical question. Do you know what a rhetorical question means? A question you don't really need to answer because everybody in the room knows the question, knows the answer to the question. How many times have you heard, or how many times have you said, saw something and said, oh, there's the blind leading the blind? Right? As parents, we do that a lot. We watch our kids going on an adventure and we go, oh. The blind leading the blind. Of course, if a blind person leads another blind person around, it's not going to end well. But I noticed something here. The focus is not on the one being led as much as it is on the one leading. This is about leaders. This is about teachers, not the student. That an interesting idea? If you don't know where you're going, don't drag others with you. I remember, I'm not a big fan of demolition derbies. I've been at too many accidents where people didn't want to be there. I'm a real big fan of going to organized ones. But I remember reading on the back of one of those cars one time when I did have to work one, it said, "Don't follow me, I'm lost too." And I thought, yeah, probably. But you know, it can happen. You ready, Dale? We went to a movie Friday night. Dale said I never worked this into my sermon, but we went to a movie Friday night, and there's a situation where a guy's walking along in the snow. And there's something that happens, and I'm not going to spoil it because it's a movie that's in the theater. But there's something under the snow that he doesn't know about. He's blind to it. And there's consequences for that blindness, right? We've all stumbled across things that we didn't know were there. We're blind to it. It doesn't mean we're bad. It doesn't mean we're evil. It means we didn't see it. And in this case, we're teaching it to others. We're taking that blindness and we're teaching it to others. If you don't know where you're going, don't drag others with you. And you know what? Sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know where I'm going. I've been saying that for a long time with the church in Ormstown. People say, what are we doing with that building, Pastor? We're doing lots of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff happening down there. And if that's what it ends up being, I'm okay with that. But I'm trusting in the one who does know the direction, that when it's time, he will reveal it. I mean, it's pretty obvious we're supposed to have it. When a $435,000 building is dumped in your hands for free, I don't really think the devil wanted us to have it. You know? So, there's some good stuff happening. Is that all that's going to happen? I don't know. And I'm okay with saying I don't know. I'm blind to that. But I have faith in the one who knows that if there is something to happen there, he will reveal it and he will provide the personnel to do it. And it will happen. In verse 40 it says, "A disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher." To put this in the context of that day, a rabbi would take a young man who showed some aptitude and would teach him. The rabbi would teach him all that he knew. So the reality is, when that student was fully trained and taught everything the rabbi knew, he would reflect the rabbi. So, due to the hostility towards the Messiah felt by the Pharisees, it'll be reflected in the students of the Pharisees. I remember, a lot of you remember Pavel. Pavel Mueller stayed with us for about 6 months. And one day we just sat down and there was nothing going on. Brenda was gone and we were just watching the boob tube and flicking through the TV, and we came to this show called Stalingrad. So Pavel says, "Oh, let's watch this." So it was about the Second World War. And it was a very interesting movie at how Hitler came into Russia, and because Stalin was his nemesis and he hated Stalin, he wanted to take Stalingrad. But he needed the oil fields down below. So he was arrogant enough that he split his army and said, Stalingrad will be a 2-day thing. We'll go take that in 2 days to a week and it'll be over, and then we'll all go down. And so they attacked Stalingrad with their planes. And they bombed and bombed and bombed and bombed and bombed the city. And then they told the field marshal, okay, go and take the city. But they bombed it so bad they couldn't get in with their tanks. They couldn't get in with their jeeps. They couldn't get in with anything. The city was collapsed. And it became a sniper war. And it went on and on and on for months. And the whole time that this was happening, and Hitler's army was surrounding Stalingrad to try and take it, the Russian army amassed a 1,000,000-man army and surrounded him. And Hitler's forces were defeated for the first time just outside of Stalingrad. But the thing that was interesting to me was, at one point, the field marshal and Hitler said to the German soldiers, if you see a Russian man, shoot him. If you see a Russian woman, shoot her. If you see a Russian child, shoot it. And you see, the Russians in Stalingrad were not fighting for land, they were fighting for survival. And Pavel turned to me and he said, that's why I hate Germans. And I went, what? And he says, we're taught to hate German people. And I never knew why. You see the actions of the student reflected in the teacher. And he never knew why. Why do I feel this way towards that nation of people? And this happened generations ago. Generations, it's not the same people. It's not the same attitudes. It's nothing like it was. But yet he was taught that. And so the student reflects the teacher. The hostility and condemnation must never be found in disciples of Jesus, because that was never taught to us by him. Right? If this is truth, if the teacher teaches the student everything he knows to the point where the student reflects the teacher, then our teacher is supposed to be Christ himself. And Christ never taught condemnation. He never taught hostility. He never taught hatred. So it should not be seen in us. Matthew 28 verses 19 and 20 are known as the Great Commission. The Great Commission. This is Jesus before he ascends to heaven. It's one of the last things he says to his disciples on earth. And we all kind of know it, but do we really know it? He says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the very end of the age." And that's the way we read it. Get it out as fast as we can because we memorize it so we can say it quickly. But let's look at it. He says, "Go therefore and make disciples." Disciples. Not believers. Disciples. The devil believes. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. You see, the teacher and the student. What you've seen in me, you teach to them, and that's how you make them disciples. And behold, he's saying, if you do this, if this is your attitude, this is your position, if this is your desire, then behold, I am with you. And I can't help but believe that the opposite is true too. Don't do this, and I'm not with you. Teach them what I taught you. You reflect me, and let them reflect you and reflect me. Verse 41. Why do you see a speck in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Louis Roland did one of the best examples of this at Ormstown Fair one year. It was hilarious. Louis is the cabinet maker in Ormstown, and he brought some sawdust, and he said, "This is sawdust." And then he took a peak cap and he put a styrofoam log across it. He put it on. So come here, I'll take that out of your eye. And I thought, that was pretty good, Louis. And it looked like a real log, like he'd really worked at this styrofoam and painted it up. But Jesus here is speaking to his disciples, right? He's not talking to the crowd. He's not talking to just anybody. He's talking to his disciples. And he says, why do you see the speck in your brother's eye? And you can't see the log in your own. He's saying, why? Where did that come from? Who taught you this? A blind person? Because I never taught you this. I never taught you this. I'm trying to rearrange my life, and one of the things that I did, like my schedule, one of the things that I did on Tuesday, I resigned from the fire department after 31 years. And there was a little bit of controversy there. I was going to resign in January. Anyway, Brenda and I kind of talked about it. But there was some stuff going on, and people were kind of talking about me behind my back, and I said, well, I'm done. And then I came home and I sat down with Brenda, and I started talking about it, and then I realized, well, me talking about them behind their back is no better than them talking about me. Obviously, we're not happy. It's time to pull a pin on this. Just because I'm doing it doesn't make it right. It's wrong. He's telling us to look at the situation in our own lives before we start picking other people's lives apart. Remember I said judge not and you will not be judged. Remember I said we're supposed to judge self. And that's what he's saying. Look at your own life. Look at your own family. Look at your own church. Look at your own situation. How are you acting and reacting and interacting with people? We are his disciples, so we need to reflect him. While we're out there and we're trying to make disciples, we need to remember that we need to make disciples of him, not us. I got enough flaws. We don't need any more like me. My father had a favorite saying when he talked about me. He used to say, there's only one in captivity, and I have it. So you don't need two of me. I have enough errors and flaws and mistakes. We are trying to make disciples of Jesus, not ourselves. And we need to clean up our own messes before we can start looking at other people. How can you say to your brother, brother, let me take out the speck that's in your eye, when you yourself do not see the log in your own? You hypocrite. He's talking to his disciples. You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, then you will see clearly to take out the speck that is in your brother's eyes. He's saying, how can you do that? How can you even say that? How can you even think that? How dare we? Yes, I know he goes to extremes here with the reference to the log, but remember, he's talking to, remember who he's talking to and the impact this hypocrisy has on the discipleship. We are called to be his disciples. We are called ourselves to make disciples. My new focus in prayer, we've been doing that moving mountains on Tuesday nights, and he says, you know, it may be just a word, or maybe just a, did I say? Oh, sorry, Sunday nights, yeah. Sorry, schedule's a little weird in my head right now. But on Sunday nights we're doing this, and he said, you know what, maybe just a word or a phrase. And for me it's, Lord, help me with the stuff in my life. That's just been coming back. Help me with me. Help me with me. Help me get out of the way. Help me get out of the way. And I just keep saying that over and over and over and over again. I'm hoping we get to move on pretty soon. And then he moves on to verse 43. He moves on to kind of a different thing with a different heading. It says, for no good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit. And I know that these are different headings, but it's the same story. He's moving down, right? And it's another application of this. Again, it's not the focus on the fruit here, but it's on, the focus is not on the tree, the focus is on the fruit. It's not about the Pharisees here, it's about his disciples. People will learn what we teach them. And we will teach them by our lives and our actions. If we expect them to bear good things, then our lives need to bear good things. We read this and we get to thinking it's all about the people that we lead to Christ, and that's the fruit in our lives, the people that we've led to Christ. But what if it's not? What if it's about us? What if it's about the fruit in our life? What if it's about the changes Christ is bringing and brought in us, and our willingness to surrender to that? You know, I had the privilege of working in orchards quite a bit over the years when I think of it. And I'm going to tell you something. The apple tree here has nothing to do with the fruit on that tree, other than cross-pollination. We're to bear our own fruit. If every apple tree was focusing on the fruit of the other tree, all its fruit would fall. Right? We need to bear fruit in our own life. How can we expect those that we are teaching to be kind and loving and giving if we're angry, self-centered, and bitter? For each tree is known by its fruit, for figs are not gathered from a thorn bush, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. When we walk to the apple trees across the street, and We look at the apples and we say, well, this is an apple tree. We don't walk up to the apples hanging there and say, hey, look, an acorn tree. Right? Peyton and I went for a walk down the Wilson. We went walking down the Wilson and we went into Pummy's Orchard. We do this every year. They always leave some apples, and Peyton thinks it's a big thing to go clean this mess up. So there's an apple here and an apple there. But we know they're apple trees, right? They're not acorn trees. When people walk up to us and see the fruit that we bear, what do they say? When they walk up to the ones we've been discipling, what will they see? This makes it pretty clear that they should see the same type of fruit that they see in us. Verse 45 says, the good person out of good treasure of his heart produces good fruit. An evil person out of the evil treasures produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So my question, I guess, is what are we teaching them? What are we teaching people? How are we being in front of them? And the cause and effect means, what fruit do they bear because of us? Because it happens our whole lives. Our whole lives. I had a friend who, I'm not going to say any names. They're not in this room. But I had a friend who was known for his bad temper. And he called me on a Saturday morning and said, can I borrow your lawnmower? I said, yeah, what's wrong with yours? Oh, bleepity, bleep, bleep, bleepity, bleep, bleep, bleep. Okay. Yeah, I'll bring you my lawnmower. So I showed up with my lawnmower, and his lawnmower was laying upside down on the stone wall. And I could just imagine what happened there. So he says, does that bleepity bleep 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 thing run? I said, yes, it does. So I started it, shut it off, said, okay. I said, now don't break it. Don't get mad and break it. No, I won't. Well, he had a son. And I said, where's so-and-so? And the mother says, look, he had a little lawnmower that blew bubbles. And he would go along the lawn blowing bubbles. When his father made 3 revolutions and the foul language and the curse words came up and his lawnmower ended up in the stone wall, his bubble lawnmower ended up in the apple tree with the same words behind it. The mother said, he's in the house. I said, we should put him in the house too. He thought. But she said, I would, but then the lawn will never get cut. People are watching us. People are seeing how we're acting and react. And this becomes so evident when you become a parent. And the things that come out of that kid's mouth. And you say, where did that come from? You? I got a visual aid. It's going to make you laugh. I got to get back to my scripture. Jesus said, give and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put in your lap. You see, when the Jewish people were given food, they had those long, I don't know what you call them, the outfits that they wore. And when they were given food, it would be dumped into there. They would make a pocket, and they would just dump it in. So if I was to give you this mason jar full of stuff, okay? Well, that's a full mason jar, right? But Jesus says that's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to shake it. And we're supposed to pack it down. How can I pack it down? Put some more in. And we're supposed to pack it down in there as much as we can get. And now this is supposed to be the way we give to people. And this is how we're supposed to love people. Matter of fact, it says it needs to be overfilled. People clean the church, I'll look after it. Okay? So he says it's going to be like Which one would you want? Which one would you want?
Overflowing.
Overflowing. Because we're talking about Christ's love. Which one are we giving? Because I don't think anybody said I want the first one. We want this one. Is that the one we're giving? Let's stand.